And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Cable. Chapters is the television show that profiles local authors, editors, and publishers in our community. I'm Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. We are delighted to have financial planner and money manager Jonda Lowe with us today, and that's the theme of our episode on Chapters: retirement, money, budgeting, and all you need to know about taking care of your money and your budget and your finances. And Jonda was born in 1966 in Huntington, West Virginia, to John and Betty McComas. She was raised in a Christian home where she was taught to speak the truth, even when it was not the most popular thing to do. She believes she owes much of her success to her parents, and at an early age, they purchased a toy telephone and encouraged her to practice using it. She quickly realized later in life that she needed to pursue another step in her financial services career after getting a degree from Marshall University, and in 1993, she secured a position as a sales assistant for Smith Barney. She worked as an advisor who focused on the rollover market and found her knowledge of IRAs to be quite helpful. She relocated to Jacksonville, Florida, where she lives today, and she's continued to challenge traditional thinking and grow her knowledge of the financial services industry, with a goal to always be to the forefront of new development and ideas. And she happened onto a revelation that permanently changed how she coaches her clients into retirement. We're going to talk about some of those themes and strategies today. And the title of her book is What Suze Orman Isn't Telling You: Can You Afford to Repeat Your Parents' Mistakes? And Jonda Lowe, welcome to Chapters. Delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you, Eliot. Appreciate it.
I wanted to ask you first a couple questions about your cover, because it was something that really pulled me into your book. Can you afford to repeat your parents' mistakes? What mistakes did our parents make, or are our parents making now, that put them in a little bit of a precarious position with their finances and their retirement?
Well, there's actually multiple mistakes, if you will. One of them that I want to make sure we cover is tax deferral. We have been encouraged from day one to defer taxes. If I said to you, do you know anyone, or probably yourself, when you got your first job and you went into HR, maybe they had a 401k and they told you about that benefit and they encouraged you to contribute to that. Maybe they were going to match your contribution. And some of the reasons that they encouraged you to do that, the conversation probably went something like, when you retire, you'll be in a lower tax bracket, you'll be making less money, therefore it'll be cheaper to pay the tax later than, of course, while you're working, and therefore you would save money. Well, the problem is deferring tax does not help your tax problem whatsoever. I like to describe it as a blank check. Some of our viewers may not know what a check is because our kids these days use debit cards. But for those of us who remember checks, I like to tell people that every time you put $1 in a tax-deferred account, you attach a blank check to that. It is payable to the IRS. It is signed by you, but it is not filled out. And basically what you're doing is you're telling the IRS, whenever you decide how much money, how much tax you want me to pay on that dollar, let me know, and I'll fill that out. And you're projecting that 10, 20, 30 years into the future. And then that problem compounds because some of us actually do make money in our investments, and so every dollar our dollar earns inside a tax-deferred account also has a blank check attached to it, made payable to the IRS, signed by you, but of course blank. And so what is unfortunate, I believe, is that we're not asking questions. We're following the masses. We're believing, the majority of everything we see, hear, and read. And unfortunately, the majority of it's either not accurate or the information you're receiving, they're just mistaken. I'm not saying that people are being deceptive or facetious. They're just, maybe they haven't looked into it themselves. But tax deferral is a big one because with the deficit that we're looking at today, we can't help but be staring at higher income tax brackets. So, and on top of that, when clients come in to meet with me and I ask them what their objectives are, I hear one repeatedly. It's a very common objective, and they usually say something like, I just want to maintain my lifestyle in retirement. Mm-hmm. And so if we're going to do that, all right, we have to ask a couple of questions, and I would just ask them of you. Do you think the cost of fuel will be more or less when you retire? Mm-hmm. It'll be more. Mm-hmm. All right? And then you ask yourself, what about food and clothing and things like that? Of course it's going to be more. So when you're saving for retirement, if you want to maintain your lifestyle, you have to make more money in retirement than you did when you were working, simply because of inflation. I mentioned this in the book. The 100-year historical average of inflation is 3.3%. Now, again, that's an average. Some years are a lot less, some years are higher. But another mistake that a lot of us have made and are making is that we're not factoring in anything for inflation. So we've got the inflation creeping in on us. We've got higher taxes. So tax deferral, I like to think of it as just a ticking tax bomb. So why would I even point that out unless I have a solution? And of course, we'll get to that later, but there is a better way than a tax deferred account, whether it's a 401k, whether it's a traditional IRA, whether it's a tax deferred annuity. Sometimes there's a better option even than that, although tax-deferred annuities are not bad, and we point that out in one of the chapters in our book, because obviously Susie's not a fan of annuities. And not just Susie, by the way, Eliot. You've read the book, so you know that I don't just pick on Susie. And it's not that I'm picking on her per se, it's just that she has such a tremendous following, and she's been given a platform to preach from lack of a better word, and it's just unfortunate that the information that's getting out there is not thorough. So when we talk about Susie, we talk about all the other financial advisors, because I'm guilty. When I trained originally for Smith Barney in Hartford, Connecticut, I trained under Sandy Weil and Jamie Dimon. And Jamie is still obviously at the helm of the financial world today, and you would think training under that type of leadership, you would know a thing or two about a thing or two. What the fact is, they train you to be a salesperson. And so that's unfortunate, but we're encouraged to tell you that the first thing you should do is to max out your 401k and get all of that, as Susie and the rest of people call it, free money. And it's not free. It's very costly. So we had that same type of, financial advisors just in general had that same type of training early on, that before we would go and recommend, that they contribute to an IRA, or they purchase a mutual fund, or they go in and consider an annuity, we needed to make sure that they were maxing out their 401k. And so, when I had this wake-up call about 4 years ago, it really was unfortunate for me, because I thought I had done a really, really good job for my clients, and come to find out I could have done a lot better.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to ask you about our culture today, and I'm glad you touched on the debit card issue, and the fact that some people don't know what checks are. In fact, some businesses and companies today don't take checks anymore. What is it about our society, you having worked with a lot of clients from a variety of different backgrounds and age groups and socioeconomic backgrounds, what is it about our culture today, do you think, that we don't save as much as we should? We see those studies, and we hear the media talking about, the younger generation doesn't save, or the people that are 25 to 45 working today aren't saving enough, which is different, I guess, from the greatest generation and our parents' age who saved a lot. What is it that's made us more spenders instead of savers? And is it because, we can just swipe a card and get what we want, and we don't really have to count the cash or write the check and balance the checkbook like we used to? Everything's online and digital now. Or what is it that makes us seem to be, as time goes on, less of savers and more of spenders?
that's a loaded question, because there's so many things that come to mind. For example, just credit cards are much more accessible. Unless your credit is poor, and I know a lot of people do struggle with poor credit these days, but it's easy to get access to credit, so therefore, you're purchasing more because you're not having to pay for it right then. And often they don't even realize the pain of the payments later. It's that instant gratification, if you will. I think another thing that goes along with that is entitlement. And I hate to say it, but the way we're raised, if we're given everything when we're being raised, for whatever reason, if you're spoiled, then you feel that entitlement. So, when you go to purchase the car, your first car, you're looking for a new car. And when you should be looking for a used car with good gas mileage.
Absolutely. Oh, no question about that.
And as far as that goes, something that you could even pay cash for your first car. So I think a lot of it has to do with, what they have lived through. Because if you dial that back to our parents, what they lived through. You have to understand when my mother and father were raised in 30s and 40s, how their parents treated them. I mean, they got the bare necessities. They got used shoes. They got hand-me-downs. They ate mashed potatoes and grits. It was just a whole different upbringing. So I think a lot of it has to do with that.
I wanted to ask you something, too, about a quote that's on page 140 of your book. And I know you've touched on some of this a moment ago, but I found this really interesting. And I love this because this is also describing how you write the book, which I think is terrific. It's not written like a finance textbook that you'd have in a college economics class. It's very relatable, very easy to understand. But you say on page 140, some of you are already ahead of me. I hear you. I've got an IRA. I'm contributing to my company 401k plan. I have a Roth IRA. And you say you're already taking money from your current self and setting it aside for your future self. And you talk a lot about the current self, to some degree the past self, and then the future self.
Right.
What did you mean by that, and what should the current self be doing for the future self in terms of saving and investing and putting their money in a good place?
So that goes back to a lesson I learned a long time ago about budgeting, and actually my father encouraged me to use envelopes. All right, so if you have a budget and there's $50 a month in that budget for toiletries, let's just say, when you get paid, that $50 went into an envelope. And when that $50 was gone, you didn't buy any more toiletries because that's all you had budgeted. What I like to do is to encourage people. I mean, if you have a budget and you're setting money aside for things like insurance and food and gasoline and things along that line, why are you not setting some money aside in an envelope for your future self? Because that person is very real. The chapter that you're referencing here, I start out by asking the reader, what do you want to be when you retire? When we go to elementary school, one of the first things they ask us is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we don't have a problem in the world answering that. Be a fireman, I want to be a nurse, whatever. But have you ever sat down and asked yourself, what do I want to be, or who do I want to be when I retire? And I've, talk about some things that I want to be. I'll never quit work, but I'll do different things. I'll volunteer. I love animals. I love to, I may serve in the soup kitchen. I love to travel. Well, that's a real person. That's a real volunteer. And that volunteer needs money to pay her bills and to travel and do whatever else she's going to do. So it just makes sense to me that if I know about this future person that I want to be, that I should start saving and planning for them now. So when I speak about what the current self should be doing for the future self, you really, whether it's, and again, there are a lot of people doing that because they're saving in a 401k. They're saving for that future self. They might not be saving in what I would consider the best vehicle, but yet they are putting some money away. So it's just a different way to think about saving for retirement, because the retiree that you want to be is a real person.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good. I want to give you a couple scenarios and ask you to tell me, in this make-believe person scenario, what should they be doing and what are the steps they should be taking to save first. So the first scenario, 25-year-old, he's just graduated from college and gotten his first or her first real job. Okay. So this is the one, with salary and benefits. It's not working at, fast food or, cutting lawns or whatever. Right. What should that person be doing? They're getting ready to go in to have that meeting with the HR representative. They realize, okay, I've got a salary coming in and I'm going to have benefits now. What should they be doing at that age with that first job to get them in line for what they need to be saving so that when they get older and they get closer to retirement, that they'll have what they need?
So for a 25-year-old who's just gotten their first job, the very first thing that they have to do is they need a budget. All right, so they have to know not what they're making, but what they're spending. What does it take to actually just keep them alive, for lack of a better word? So the necessities. And once they have that budget, they need 6 months, in my opinion. Now, a lot of advisors will say 9 to 12, but a minimum of 6 months of that monthly expense, whatever it is, $2,000. So they need $12,000 in a rainy day. We call it rainy day fund, but that's not a mutual fund. That's not a stock. That's a checking or savings account, probably a savings account where it's a little bit more difficult, one that doesn't have a debit card attached to it. So it's a little bit more difficult to access that money because it really is that scenario where this is a great opportunity. They love their job. They love working there, but they can't be guaranteed that the next day when they go in, the company might not want them to work for them anymore. So they gives them that 6 months cushion so that they're not frantic as they're looking for another job. Beyond that, you've read the book, so you know I am not a fan of a 401k whatsoever. So if I got a hold of that 25-year-old and they were talking with the HR person, I would highly encourage them to not take the 401k. Again, from the book, you'll see that we've got some alternatives that we believe are much better, especially for a 25-year-old, because they can save a smaller amount for a longer period of time, avoid the market risk, which we talk about in the book, have lower cost, which we talk about in the book, protect the asset, and minimize income tax. So if we get them early enough, we can really get them on the right path quickly. But the budget and the rainy day fund are key.
Second scenario, I'm 50 years old. I'm only going to work 15 more years.
Okay.
And I sit down and I look at my budget and I realize, oh no, I haven't saved as much as I should. Or maybe I've had some medical problems that have drained my reserves. Or maybe I've had a spouse that has passed away. Or I was a 2-income household, now I'm a 1-income household. Or my goodness, my son and daughter's getting ready to go to college. Variety of different factors. But if you're that 50-year-old and you realize, oh my goodness, the end of my working life is coming closer, and I haven't saved as much. What are some things that they could be doing, or should be doing, or steps they should take to try to put themselves in a better shape for when retirement does come?
Well, these are the tough questions that I don't mind answering, but usually people don't want to hear the answers. And when they hear the answers, they don't want to implement the answers. For example, if you're a 50-year-old in that scenario, the first thing you need to do is evaluate what you're spending. Where's your money going? Once you know where your money's going, you need to determine where you can shave off. Where can you cut back? Literally to the extent you might want to consider downsizing, moving to a smaller home. All right? You're either going to, here's the 3 things you're going to do. You're either going to save more, work longer, or spend less. Those are the 3 options when you go to retire. It's your retirement party like we talk about in the book, and you realize, wow, the 401k doesn't have what I thought it was. You're either going to work longer, save more, or spend less. And so the spending less is obviously a good option when you're 15 years out from retirement. But again, that's a very painful thing to say to someone, because they like their new car, they like their big house, they like their pool, they like their nice clothes, and we all like those things, don't get me wrong. But if you are staring down the pike at retirement and you've got 15 years to go and you have not saved adequately, you got to make some changes. And there's just no other way around that. If you don't make those changes, then 65 is not going to be your retirement date. It's just not. Unless, of course, your retirement is not what I expect my retirement to be. Everybody's definition of retirement is different. And so, that 50-year-old might be able to get by on a couple $1,000s a month. I don't know what their desire is. But the bottom line is, when you haven't saved enough, you've got to evaluate where your money is going. If you can find areas to trim and cut back, you need to do that. And of course, then take that money and do the right thing with it. On top of that, second job. Again, these are things people don't want to hear and don't want to implement, but they're very realistic answers to that question.
And one of the things I like, Jonda, about this book is that you never give sort of a it's too late kind of scenario. And I think that's terrific no matter what chapter you're reading here. If someone is not where they should be or has their money going somewhere it shouldn't be, you have a very optimistic, it's not too late to change. And I'm so glad that even in that scenario with the 50-year-old that's got retirement 15 years or so down the road, there's no sense of it's too late to fix it.
Not at all. One of the things that we offer, and I know a number of advisors do offer free consultations, but we absolutely want to let people know that if you need a second opinion, or a first opinion for that matter, if you don't have a financial advisor, you're not working with someone, or maybe the person you started with has moved on or retired, give the office a call and we can schedule, even if they're out of town. The technology that we have these days, we do Skype calls and webinars and things like that, so we're very happy to do what we call a portfolio review. You would be surprised where you might find money hiding, and I know that sounds a little silly, but even in old life insurance policies that you may have purchased years ago, or your parents may have purchased for you, if they were whole life or some type of universal life policy that hasn't been reviewed in several years, then that's an opportunity perhaps for some cash value that you might be able to reallocate. So lots of options. The first thing that I would do is just get a review. Get a review. It's not going to cost you anything through our firm. We're happy to do it. It's the way we earn your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm so glad you said that, because we see all these commercials for, Voya and Charles Schwab on TV all the time, and I know some people that I know, people in my family and friends, say, well, I just don't feel comfortable, or I don't really want somebody knowing, but having a financial planner myself, it was the easiest and one of the best conversations I ever had, and I'm so glad I did it years ago. I did it when I was 25 and started
Fantastic.
working. But I think that is one thing, and I think you touch on that as kind of a touchstone in this book, is that it's an easy conversation to have, and talking about these things doesn't have to be difficult, and doesn't have to be in a language or in using terminology that is over our heads. That it is something that can be worked on with a financial planner, which I think is very good.
Absolutely. And let me just throw a comment in here. If you're married, please bring your spouse.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a gentleman and you're calling in to make the appointment, please bring your wife, because it is what it is. Statistics show that our women are outliving our men by 4 to 5 years. It used to be actually closer to 8, and that window is narrowing now. But still, they're outliving our guys. So what it means is, if you're a woman right now and you are not involved in the financial decision making, you're going to be at some point. And we want you to be ready for that. We don't want you to be thrown into that. I hate to say it, but I've seen it time and time again when a widow, is in that situation and knows nothing about the finances and goes to get some help. I don't want to say 9 times out of 10, but often she's taken advantage of because she doesn't know any better. All right. So it's if you love your wife, you need to bring her to that appointment. You need to educate her. It really should be a joint venture, because and for that matter, he may not pass away first, but it's just a great opportunity for them to be together and understand what they have, understand how it works, understand how it's helping them meet their goals, and then it's just a much better relationship for all involved.
All the chapters in your book, Jonda, are great, but there are 2 I really liked, and I wanted to ask you to talk briefly about those. Chapter 12, Arbitrage, the ninth wonder of the world,
Okay.
and Chapter 13, the Domino Effect.
Wow.
Tell us a little bit about the Arbitrage chapter and some things that we need to know from that, and then the Domino Effect. What are some things we need to keep in mind with regards to that idea?
Okay, well, let me see. I'm going to have to abbreviate the answer on arbitrage because we need to talk a little bit about the alternative that we offer in the book, which is Index Universal Life. And arbitrage is, we do it all the time without realizing what we're doing. Let me give an example. If you were going to buy a home right now and you had $200,000 in the bank, okay, and you found a home for $150,000, and you're looking at interest rates, and you have good credit, and the bank will loan you the money for 4%, okay? And you think, well, I was really wanting to pay cash, and I really didn't want the payment. But if you talked with me, I might encourage you to invest your $150,000 or $200,000, all right, in a safe manner. And if we can make more than 4%, you're ahead, because your interest rate on your loan is 4. If we make 5 or 6 on your investment, there's a 2% spread, and that's arbitrage. You're benefiting from a price difference. All right. Now, how does that apply to what we talk about in the book? Well, one thing that an early chapter that I'll just touch on really quick to lead into the arbitrage is that, unfortunately, a lot of investors do not understand how the markets truly work. I'll give you a quick example. If the market were down today 50%, okay, we'd all be, wailing and gnashing of teeth in the streets. But let's say it was down 50% this year, and then next year it's up 50%, all right? Mathematically, statistically, I don't want to say the market, but the media can advertise that for that period of time, the average rate of return was 0%, because down 50, up 50 is 0, divided by 2 is 0. So mathematically, that is a correct statement. For that period of time, the market averaged 0%. All right, so if you hear that, or if you read that, and you're not one to pay close attention to your 401k or your mutual fund or your IRA or whatever investments you might have, then mentally you're thinking, dodged a bullet, thank God, at least it's flat, at least I got my money back. That's how we process that information. All right, now let's do a real application of that. Let's say you had $100 in this market this year and it went down 50%. All right, at the end of the year we have $50,
right.
All right? So The next year when the market goes back up 50%, you would think, or the client would think, they're back to 100. But the fact is they only had $50 to go back up 50%. So they made $25 on their 50, bringing them back to 75, which means they're down 25% in a market that they can legally say averaged 0%. When you are predicting the future value of a variable product, such as the stock market, you cannot do it with an average. Because the average will only be accurate if the market never has a down day. And we know that's not true. That's not possible. So with that said, we have an alternative that we're discussing in the book, and we encourage on a regular basis with our clients to avoid market risk. We don't want you to have the money in the market. We don't want you to have that down 50, back up 50, and still be down 25%. And if you are in that scenario and in your 401k and you're getting ready to retire, when you take $50,000 out to live on this year, okay, and then the market goes down, well, you don't have, if you had $1 million and you took out 50, you're not going to have 950 left over. You're going to have less, whatever that number is, and then you have less money to recover. Well, what Arbitrage does for you is they say if you have $1 million, all right, and you have it inside of an Index Universal Life product, which is in the cash value of the product, you can actually take that asset and you can pledge it as collateral, all right? So we can say, look, we have $1 million, because you do. It's your money. So you pledge it as collateral, and then you ask the insurance company, would you loan me $50,000 this year? And they say, absolutely. Well, why wouldn't they? Because you've already pledged $1 million.
Right.
So the benefit of that is, in the 401k, you take the $50,000 out, you only have $950 left. We hope the market goes up and at least recovers the $50 you took out. It really needs to go above that because of inflation, but the fact is, more than likely, that's going to be a downward spiral. We talk about that in our book. Is the spiral of death is actually what we call it, because the money can quickly erode, especially if you're in a series of negative markets in a row. But in arbitrage, 100% of your money is still in an account that can benefit from market-like returns. And in an Index Universal Life product, we're never in the market, but you do receive interest credits, and we don't have time to get into that today. Hopefully they'll purchase a copy of the book or read it, or they'll give us a call at the office and we can explain it. But that arbitrage allows that million, in our example, to stay invested and receive an interest credit, let's say, of 6%. Very doable. Actually, the 25-year history in a lot of our strategies is 7.5%. So that million could receive an interest credit of 7.5%. So now we're $1,075,000, or forgive me on the zeros, dependent upon the calculator, which is pretty pathetic these days, isn't it? But the bottom line is, with that number continuing to increase, because you're not withdrawing your asset, you're not depleting your asset in arbitrage, you're actually borrowing, and as long as the interest rate on the loan and the interest credit on your asset, as long as there's a difference, like if you're paying 4 and this is earning 6, as long as there's a positive difference, then it's called positive arbitrage. One of the things we have to do as your advisor is we have to manage that arbitrage, because it can go negative. So in a year where the market either does 0 or goes down, again, in an Index Universal Life product, you can't lose money, so you would get a 0 that year. And if your interest was 4%, then that loan cost you money that year. There's ways to manage that. There's wash loans and things like that, again, that we don't have time to get into today, but arbitrage is your friend.
Yes, and it was a fascinating chapter, and I enjoyed that so much. And one of the things I really like about this book in general is that you explain things in terms that anybody could understand. You don't have to have a degree in finance or be a mathematician, and I certainly am not that. And I was able to get a lot of value from your book. And Jonda, in our final moments, if someone would like to get a copy of your book, or they'd like to get in contact with you to talk about some of the concepts in your book, or maybe they need to have a consultation about their financial situation, how can they get in contact with you? How can they reach you?
Well, they certainly can order their copy of the book at jondaknows.com. If they would like to, if you're listening locally, we do have 3 locations, including Empire Books, that's carrying our book, Marshall Bookstore, and then Guiding Light. Beyond that, you can order at Amazon and Books A Million and Barnes & Noble online. So lots of places to get a copy of the book. As far as the consultation goes, we do have a toll-free number, which is 844-455-6697. And you'll probably be speaking with a lady by the name of Amber, and she'll be happy to set up a time that we can get together.
Excellent. Very good. Jonda Lowe is the author of the book, What Suze Orman Isn't Telling You. Can you afford to repeat your parents' mistakes? Anything you want to know about getting yourself on track or getting yourself back on track with your finances and your retirement. A spectacular book, a book that has been needed, I think, for a long time. So thank you for writing it. It was a pleasure to have you on Chapters. And as you write more books about finance, we'd love to have you back on to talk more about it. So thank you again.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Eliot.
And we also want to take a moment to say thanks to Charlotte McCoy and her staff at Empire Books and News for providing our on-site technical assistance today, as well as our studio taping space today. And we encourage you to stop by Empire Books and News for all of your reading needs. Pick up a copy of Jonda Lowe's book, and also many of the authors, publishers, and editors you've seen featured on Chapters have their works for sale here at Empire Books and News, so we encourage you to stop by and check that out. And if you've got a question, comment, or suggestion about this Chapters program or any Chapters program you've seen on Armstrong Cable, we want to hear from you. We've made it easy for you to reach us here on the show. You can send us an email to the address that pops up right here at the bottom of the screen, lp4@zoominternet.net. That's the email address where you can reach us right here on Chapters. And if you've missed a previous episode of Chapters, or you want to go back and see another episode of Chapters for maybe the second or third time, we've made that available to you as well through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube. All you need to do is go to www.youtube.com/Armstrong One Wire, all one word. From there, click on the Chapters link, and you can view over 50 episodes of author, publisher, and editor interviews right there on your computer screen, your iPad, your iPhone, whatever it is that you would like to use as your digital recording or listening device. And we appreciate those of you who've watched episodes and left comments in the comments field. We appreciate that so much. If you'd like to make Chapters a regular part of your viewing or listening experience, we've made it possible to you and made it possible for you to do that through the Armstrong One Wire page on YouTube. So we encourage you to check out previous episodes at that location. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters. Please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.